You didn't come here to learn. You came here to remember. Before the noise, before the beliefs, before the name they gave you, there was something else. A presence, a knowing, a quiet truth etched deep into the fabric of your being, and somewhere along the line it was buried, not lost, just hidden. Hidden beneath the masks you were taught to wear, the roles you were praised for playing, the thoughts that were never truly yours. You were told to search outside, to collect answers, to earn your worth. But none of it brought you home. That ache you felt, that quiet restlessness, it wasn't confusion. It was memory trying to surface. Because deep down, you've always known something was off. Not wrong, just unreal. This isn't about religion, belief, or blind faith. This is older. It's what Thoth called the silent trick, a remembering beyond thought, a truth so ancient, it speaks not in words, but in vibration. You weren't born empty. That's the first lie. You arrived full, carrying memory, knowing, codes etched into the folds of your soul. But the world doesn't greet you as a soul. It greets you as a project to shape, a name to fill, a blank slate to write on. And so begins the forgetting. From your very first breath, the world teaches you to disconnect. They tell you what to cry for, what to fear, what to chase. The stories begin early. What's good? What's bad? What makes you lovable? What makes you worthy? You learn quickly that silence is uncomfortable, that stillness is lazy, that curiosity must fit within curriculum. The soul doesn't speak in any of these languages, so it grows quiet. And then, we mistake the quiet for absence. But it was never gone, just drowned beneath everything you were told to be. This isn't a conspiracy of governments or shadowed elites. This is the human condition. It's what every mystic, initiate, and sage has whispered about for centuries. From the pyramids of Kem, to the halls of Eleusis, to the forests of Vedic sages, this truth was guarded, not because it was dangerous, but because most weren't ready to carry it. Birth is not the beginning. It's the start of forgetting. Awakening isn't about learning something new. It's about unlearning everything false. And Thoth, scribe of the gods, master of hidden knowledge, never taught with words alone. His greatest transmission was silence, because remembering can't be explained. It must be experienced. You cannot think your way to truth. You can only remember it. And memory, true memory, doesn't come from the mind. It rises like a knowing from beneath all you've forgotten. But here's the twist. You've participated in your own forgetting. We all have. Because to remember means to let die every identity you've built. The persona, the pride, the mask you wear, to feel safe in the eyes of others, all of it must dissolve. And your ego, clever as it is, would rather you keep pretending. It would rather you be spiritual than silent, informed rather than aware, awake in appearance, but still asleep beneath. At some point, you stopped asking who you are and started asking who you need to be to belong. That's when the drift began. The drift from essence to identity. You filled your life with goals, distractions, achievements, and books, but the deeper you dug, the more lost you felt. Why? Because none of it pointed you inward. It was all a performance for a stage built by someone else. But the soul never forgets. It waits. It leaves clues, in dreams, in déjà vu, in the quiet ache you feel when everything seems fine but something still feels off. That ache is the whisper of who you've always been, trying to rise through the noise of who you've been told to be. And sometimes, the silence gets too loud to ignore. Some truths can't be shared here, not because they're forbidden, but because they're too sacred to survive algorithms. That's why we created Insights Academy, our free newsletter, where we share what can't be said on YouTube. And right now, you'll get a free copy of the Kybalion, just by signing up. Links in the description. The journey back begins not with seeking, but with stopping. You don't remember by doing more. You remember by letting go of what isn't you. And this is the hardest part, because some of what's false has become so familiar, it feels like home. But just because something feels familiar doesn't mean it's true. Familiarity is the perfume of repetition, not truth. And when you finally stop chasing, when you become still enough, something ancient starts to stir. The noise fades, the body softens. And beneath the roles, beliefs, opinions, and traumas, something remains untouched. You catch glimpses of it in moments of peace, when no one is watching, when no one is expecting, when you're not trying to be anything at all. That's when the remembering begins, not loud, not dramatic, but real and irreversible. There are places on this earth where words were never meant to enter, not because they were forbidden, but because they were useless. Stone chambers carved in silence, built not to impress the eye, but to echo something deeper. Places like the Temple of Luxor, the Serapeum, the hidden sanctuaries beneath Saqqara, structures encoded with geometry, vibration, and presence. And at the center of them all was not a doctrine, not a teacher, but silence. Because silence is not the absence of sound, it's the presence of something else entirely. In these ancient halls, disciples did not come to study. They came to die, not in flesh, but in illusion. The death of the persona, the slow unraveling of everything they thought they were. There were no lectures, no affirmations, no spiritual theatrics, only the unbearable stillness of themselves, stripped of distractions. This was initiation, the real kind. The kind that breaks you, not to harm you, but to reveal what can't be broken. Modern spirituality has made forgetting look like enlightenment. It sells you tools, tricks, and teachings to fix what was never broken. But the ancient ones understood. The soul doesn't need fixing. The mind does. The illusion does. The version of you that clings to identity, achievement, belief, that's what needs to fall apart. And it can't fall apart through books or affirmations. Only silence does that. You see, silence doesn't give answers. It removes the noise that hides them. In the temples, initiates would sit for hours, days, even weeks, facing nothing but themselves. No mirrors, no guidance, no distractions, just the pure weight of their own presence. And one by one, the layers would peel away. The ego would flail, beg, bargain. But eventually, it would fall quiet. And when that silence became unbearable, when there was nothing left to hold on to, something else would emerge. Not new, not foreign, but ancient, familiar. Like remembering the sound of your own name after lifetimes of amnesia. This is why Thoth never spoke openly of his greatest teachings. Because truth, real truth, doesn't need a voice. It needs a vessel. And your soul has always been that vessel. Every temple was built, not as a monument to gods, but as a reflection of you. The columns mirrored your spine. The chambers echoed the layers of your psyche. The hidden sanctums weren't hidden from you. They were hidden in you. You are the temple. You always have been. But temples aren't built for comfort. They are forged in reverence, precision, and discipline. And the modern world doesn't train you for that. It trains you for distraction, consumption, convenience. The moment you feel discomfort, you reach for a screen, a snack, a scroll, anything but stillness. Because stillness reminds you of everything you've buried. But buried doesn't mean gone. It means waiting. You've been taught to fear emptiness. But emptiness is the portal. It is the sacred void through which remembrance returns. In that void, you meet the parts of yourself you left behind. The wild self, the knowing self, the fearless self. Not the one that strives, performs, or proves, but the one that simply is. The ancients knew, before you can remember who you are, you must be willing to face everything you are not. And most people never do. Not because they can't, but because they won't sit still long enough to witness the truth that silence reveals. They'd rather keep performing identity than risk the collapse of illusion. But those who dare, those who sit in the temple of themselves long enough, start to feel it, the stirring, the pulse, the frequency beneath the thoughts. It doesn't speak, it doesn't shout, it hums, like the first sound of creation waking back up in your bones. This is the path of remembrance. Not a journey outward, but a descent inward. And it always begins the same way. Not with knowledge, but with nothing. There comes a moment in every path, quiet, unglamorous, and usually alone, when you look in the mirror and don't recognize the reflection, not because your features have changed, but because something deeper stirs. You begin to sense that the version of yourself you've been living isn't really you. The voice in your head, the roles you've played, the beliefs you've defended, the mask you forgot you were wearing, they begin to crack. And when that happens, a strange kind of grief appears. You mourn not a loss, but the realization that much of your life was built on borrowed identity. Thoth didn't ask his initiates to chant, to worship, or to memorize truths. He asked them to see, not through eyes, but through presence. He knew that until you're willing to face the illusion of self, nothing else you awaken will be stable. You can accumulate knowledge, master techniques, quote scriptures, but if the foundation is false, everything on top of it will collapse. Not because you're unworthy, but because truth can't grow in a lie. It has to be cleared, seen, burned away. So the first real initiation wasn't magical, it was brutal honesty. It was looking at yourself, your reactions, your opinions, your patterns, and asking, is this actually me? Or is this what I've had to become in order to survive, belong, or feel safe? The truth is, most people don't know who they are. They know who they were praised for being. They know who they were punished for being. They know who got love, who got ignored, who got laughed at. And so they became a performance, a personality adapted to win approval and avoid abandonment. And the performance worked. That's the danger. It got you accepted, respected, maybe even successful. But deep down, you knew. Something felt off, like a life lived inside a costume. And the longer you wear a mask, the more it sticks, until eventually, you forget it was ever a mask at all. You call it your nature. That's just who I am. But it's not. It's who you became under pressure, fear, repetition. Real nature doesn't shrink to fit. It expands, but only when it's no longer afraid of being seen. So what do you do when you see the illusion? You don't fight it. You sit with it. You name it. You feel the pain of it. And then, you release it. Not to become someone new, but to become what you were before the world told you who to be. This is the work most people avoid. They'd rather skip ahead to enlightenment, third eyes, and mystical downloads. But Thoth didn't give his disciples visions until they faced the human, because divinity means nothing if it's built on delusion. And the ego, spiritual or otherwise, will do everything it can to protect its story. It will call discomfort a sign to stop. It will call silence boredom. It will call authenticity too much. But that's just its fear of dying. And it will die, not in a blaze of glory, but in quiet recognition that it was never you. It was never the real you. It was a container, useful for a time, but never meant to be permanent. When you stop feeding it, it withers. And beneath it, something ancient begins to breathe again. Something that doesn't need to be explained or validated. It simply is. So the mirror is not your enemy. It is your liberation. It shows you what isn't you, so you can begin to reclaim what is. And once you've faced it, once you've seen through the illusion, there's no going back. The spell breaks, the performance ends, and the remembering begins. There's a question so simple, most overlook it, so powerful, most fear it, and so ancient, it's been whispered through temples, mystery schools, and initiation rites since the beginning of conscious memory. Thoth gave it not as a command, but as a seed. Is this really mine? That's it. No mantra, no ritual, no ceremony, just a quiet, inward inquiry that begins to unravel lifetimes of unconscious programming. Because the truth is, most of what we call ours was never truly chosen. It was inherited, absorbed, or implanted, like code running in the background, shaping our lives without permission. Think about it. The dreams you chase, The fears you avoid, the values you claim, where did they come from? Were they born from your soul's desire or passed down from someone else's fear? That inner critic, was it your voice or a parent's, a teacher's, society's? That burning ambition, was it ever yours or just a survival instinct masked as purpose? When you begin asking this one question, is this really mine? You'll be shocked by how much of your life is borrowed. How much of your identity has been stitched together from the expectations, traumas, and influences of others. The illusion isn't just in the world around you. It lives in the unquestioned parts of your inner world. Every belief you hold unexamined becomes a blindfold. Every reaction you repeat without awareness becomes a script, and the system thrives on that. It doesn't need you to think, it just needs you to perform. But once you start asking, really asking, something shifts. The autopilot breaks. The story loses grip. You stop running old code and start reclaiming authorship. This is the moment awareness becomes your rebellion. Because self-inquiry isn't passive, it's disruptive. It begins to break down the layers of conditioning with surgical precision. You start to see which emotions are echoes of the past, which choices are camouflage, which dreams are cages painted gold. And here's the secret. You don't need to find the right answer. The question itself does the work. The power isn't in the answer. It's in the space the question opens. And that's where the remembering begins. Not in acquiring new knowledge, but in stripping away what was never yours to carry. Sometimes, that's painful. Letting go of a belief that's defined you for years can feel like losing a limb, but it's not loss, it's liberation. You're not losing yourself. You're losing everything that ever blocked you from yourself. What remains is raw, quiet, and powerful beyond measure. And when you do begin asking this question, really asking it, don't be surprised if the world around you starts to feel unfamiliar. That's the shift. You're no longer participating in the illusion blindly. You're starting to see it. The media feels more manipulative. Certain friendships feel performative. The work you once found pride in might start to feel hollow. It's not that the world changed overnight. It's that your perception finally cleared. This clarity doesn't come from adding more, but from removing what was false. And that process isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's not about having the right answers. It's about holding the right questions. Is this really mine? Becomes your compass. Not to judge, but to discern. And with each answer that rises, whether it's yes or no, you reclaim a piece of your soul. A piece that was waiting all along for you to come home. There's a moment, sometimes fleeting, when everything quiets. It can happen in the middle of a forest, staring at a fire, watching the sky dissolve into dusk. There's no voice, no thought, no need to prove or understand, only stillness. And in that stillness, something ancient stirs. Not a memory in the traditional sense, but a vibration. A feeling that doesn't come from the mind, but from somewhere deeper. You can't explain it, but in that moment, you know, I've been here before. I've always been. That, right there, is the silent name. It's not a word. It's not something you can pronounce or translate. The silent name isn't given to you by anyone else. It's not on your birth certificate or whispered during a sacred rite. It's a frequency, a recognition. It's who you were before you were named, before language, before fear, before the layers of personality and performance began to wrap around your soul like armor. And the only way to hear it again is silence. Thoth spoke of this often, not in scrolls, but in presence. His disciples weren't told their truths. They were led into quiet, into space so still it became deafening, because the deeper truths don't come with thunder. They don't shout, they wait. And most never hear them, not because they're hidden, but because most never stop long enough to listen. Silence has become foreign in today's world. It's uncomfortable. We run from it, fill it with noise, distraction, stimulation, anything but stillness, because deep down, we know what silence threatens. the illusion of who we think we are. But it also promises something far more valuable, the remembrance of what we've always been. The silent name is your soul's fingerprint, unique, eternal, untouched by time or trauma. And while you can't speak it, you've felt it before, in sudden peace, in inexplicable knowing, in moments when everything aligned and no words were needed. The mistake people make is looking for it through effort. You can't force the silent name. You can only create the space for it. It arrives in surrender, not striving, in stillness, not seeking. It's the absence of noise that reveals it, not the presence of new information. And once you touch it, even once, the false self begins to lose its grip, because you now have a reference point. You've tasted something real, and no amount of illusion can satisfy you again. This is why so many spiritual paths emphasize silence, not as punishment, but as portal. It's why initiates spent days, even weeks, in chambers without light or sound. They weren't meditating, they were remembering. And what they found wasn't some abstract divinity, it was themselves, before the forgetting. There's a reason silence makes some people restless. It's not boring, it's confronting. It holds up a mirror to all the noise we've used to define ourselves. And if you stay with it, if you don't flinch or flee, you'll feel that hum, that faint familiar frequency beneath the chaos. That's your silent name. The more you return to it, the more you embody it, and you'll notice the shift. You'll speak less, but with more weight. You'll need fewer words, but they'll carry more truth. Because once you start vibrating from that place, you don't need to convince anyone of who you are. You don't need the world's approval, its titles, its applause. You've remembered something the world can't take from you, your origin, not in flesh, but in frequency. And what begins in silence will echo through every part of your life. The way you listen changes. The way you see others changes. The noise no longer hooks you because you've become the stillness behind it. You've stopped reacting and started resonating. That's what the silent name does. It doesn't speak for you. It speaks through you. There's a reason most people never remember who they really are. It's not because the truth is too far away, but because it's too close. Close enough to feel, but heavy enough to frighten. Remembrance is not all light, clarity, and transcendence. That's a myth. In truth, to remember is to unearth. And what lies buried beneath the surface of your soul isn't just divine essence, it's pain, fear, distortion, and all the fragments you thought you left behind. This is the veil, and crossing it requires a kind of courage most never develop, the willingness to meet your own shadows without flinching. People often chase awakening for the bliss, the calm, the expanded awareness. But Thoth knew something few modern seekers accept. True remembrance begins where your illusions collapse. It's not romantic, it's raw. When your soul starts to stir, it doesn't just flood you with peace, it surfaces everything that kept you from it. The unprocessed emotions, the false identities, the wounds you learned to wear like armor. It all comes up, not to punish you, but to be seen. And that's when many turn back, because it's easier to stay asleep in comfort than to wake up in chaos. The chaos isn't from truth, it's from what the truth exposes. The veil isn't just something placed over your eyes, it's something you participated in weaving, layer by layer, story by story. I'm not good enough. I need to earn love. This is just how life is. These weren't just thoughts, they became identities. And now, as remembrance begins, those identities are being peeled back. The ego feels like it's dying, and in a way, it is. Crossing the veil doesn't happen in a single moment. It happens in waves. One day you feel like everything is clear, the next you're knee-deep in self-doubt, wondering if any of this is real. That's the process. It's not linear. It's not clean. You're not doing it wrong. The soul doesn't awaken through perfection. It awakens through honesty. Brutal, unflinching honesty. You'll see parts of yourself you were taught to hate. Emotions you shoved down just to survive. Patterns you swore weren't yours, but are. The forgetting wasn't just about memory. It was protection. Until now. Because now, the veil is thinning. Not just globally, but within you. You've started to question, to feel the weight of your masks, to sense that there's something beneath the noise. That's not coincidence. That's the soul knocking. And when you finally open the door, don't expect only light. Expect everything. The fear, the shame, the grief. But know this, it only surfaces because it's ready to be released. It rises not to hurt you, but to be freed. This is where most people get stuck. They think awakening means escape. But remembrance isn't escape. It's embodiment. You're not ascending away from your wounds. You're reclaiming the parts of you that got fragmented along the way. The crying child, the silenced voice, the rage that never got to roar, the sadness that sat unspoken behind your smile. All of it is yours, and none of it is wrong. Thoth's initiates were never told to avoid their shadows. They were taught to sit with them, to name them, to understand that the path to light goes through the dark. Because your soul isn't afraid of darkness, it only fears the lie. And when you stop lying to yourself, when you stop performing, something happens. The veil begins to dissolve, not because you forced it, but because you no longer need it. And once you see yourself clearly, even the parts you hated, you'll find something surprising. Underneath the pain, the shame, the fear, is tenderness, innocence, power, wholeness. These weren't things you had to earn. They were always there, waiting to be remembered. The pain wasn't blocking you. It was guiding you back to yourself. So if you're in the thick of it, if your world feels like it's falling apart, if you're feeling more lost than found, good. That means you're close. That means the veil is cracking. That means you're no longer running. And as Thoth taught, remembrance begins the moment you stop turning away. Because when you finally face everything you've avoided, you'll find what was always waiting beneath it. You. You don't need to leave the world to awaken. You need to stop letting the world define you. That's the shift. That's what Thoth meant when he spoke of the waking trance. Not a sleep that happens when your eyes close, but a deeper sleep that persists even when they're open. Most people live in it without ever realizing. They move through their days on autopilot, chasing goals that aren't theirs, reacting to opinions they never questioned, clinging to identities they were told to adopt. And all the while, something quiet inside them waits, watches, remembers. But when the soul begins to stir, something strange happens. The noise doesn't stop, but your relationship to it changes. You begin to hear the voice beneath the voice, the one that doesn't shout, doesn't panic, doesn't need validation. It's always been there, still, steady, ancient. It doesn't tell you what to do. It reminds you of who you are. And suddenly, what used to trigger you starts to feel hollow. The gossip, the race to be right, the pursuit of status, it all starts to look like theater, like characters playing roles they don't even remember choosing. This doesn't mean you disappear from the world. In fact, the opposite. You start to show up more fully, but not as a reaction, as a choice. You listen, not to respond, but to understand. You speak, not to impress, but to reveal. You act, not to survive, but to align. You no longer need to force outcomes, manipulate situations, or perform for approval. The trance is broken. Life still moves. Deadlines, traffic, phone calls, they're still there. But you're not caught in them anymore. You're behind them, above them, within them, but not defined by them. This is what remembrance feels like in real life. Not visions or voices or dramatic awakenings, just a quiet steadiness, a subtle power, a knowing that doesn't need explanation. It's when you walk into a room and no longer shrink to fit it, when someone questions you and you don't feel the need to defend, when something falls apart and you don't fall with it. It's not that you've stopped caring, it's that you've stopped clinging. The world may still call your name, try to hook you back into the old roles, but something inside you won't answer. Not out of rebellion, but out of truth. The trance doesn't own you anymore. You're awake, but not above life. You're present within it, seeing clearly, moving deliberately, choosing with intention. And yes, it can feel lonely at first. When you stop reacting, others might not understand. They may think you've changed, and they'd be right. You've remembered. You're no longer trying to be understood by those still trapped in the roles you've outgrown. That's not arrogance. That's liberation. You stop needing others to validate your clarity. The calm inside you becomes enough. This is where true presence begins. Not a concept, not a technique, a state of being, where you're no longer playing out old scripts, but writing new ones with each breath. And the more you live this way, the more others start to feel something shift too, because presence is contagious. Not through words, but energy. People can feel when you've stopped performing, when your peace isn't conditional, when your silence speaks louder than their noise. And from this place, your intuition sharpens. Decisions don't need spreadsheets, they need stillness. You start to feel what's right, not because someone told you, but because your soul whispers it. The world calls this mystical, but it's not. It's natural. It's the trance that's unnatural. The busyness, the overstimulation, the constant need to react, that's the distortion. Stillness is your original language, and now you're learning to speak it again. So no, you're not escaping the world. You're re-entering it, but on your own terms. Awake, aware, aligned. Not needing to fix everything, but no longer willing to be ruled by it either. And from that space, you'll start to notice something. Life doesn't resist your presence. It responds to it. Opportunities, people, insights, they begin to flow, not because you chased them, because you became a match for them. And that's the gift of breaking the trance. You remember how to live, not as a shadow of yourself, but as the full presence you've always been. Not above the storm, but untouched by it. Not fleeing the noise, but unmoved by it. The world doesn't need more performers. It needs rememberers. Those who carry the silent frequency of truth. And you've felt it. It's not loud. It's not urgent. It's just there, always waiting. When the soul begins to remember, the ego doesn't surrender. It evolves. It puts on a new robe, trades arrogance for mysticism, and whispers, "Now you're awake. Now you're special." This is the final trap, and it's the most seductive of all. You start to feel the shift, the clarity, the peace. People notice it in your presence. You speak less, but your words carry more weight. You understand things that once confused you. You see through the lies, and if you're not careful, that becomes your new identity, the awakened one, the wise one, the spiritual one. But that's just ego with a new mask. It's not the same ego that needed approval from the outside world. It's the one that now seeks it from the inner world. It tells you you've risen above others, that your path is purer, your insights deeper, your awareness higher, and you believe it because it feels so true. But that's exactly how the trap works. Thoth warned of this. Not with doctrine, not with fear, but with simplicity. He showed his disciples that the final illusion is superiority. Because the moment you think you've arrived, you've stopped moving. And the moment you think you're above the illusion, you've already fallen into a deeper one. Spiritual ego is hard to detect because it hides behind language that sounds wise. You say things like, "They're not ready," or "They're still asleep," or "I've done the work." But inside, there's still a part of you craving distinction, a part that needs to be seen as more aware, more conscious, more evolved. And that part isn't evil, it's just scared. Because letting go of that identity means stepping into nothingness again. And nothingness is terrifying to the ego, because it can't exist there. The irony is, true awakening doesn't feel like arrival. It feels like softening, like surrender, like being no one and needing nothing. The further you go, the less you need to prove, the less you need to speak, the less you need to explain yourself or justify your path. You don't become more, just more real. You laugh more. You let go easier. You stop needing to be right. You realize that your truth doesn't need to invalidate anyone else's, that silence can be a deeper teaching than any sermon. That humility isn't thinking less of yourself. It's just thinking about yourself less often. And here's the real test. Can you still be present when no one's watching? Can you hold your awareness when there's no stage, no audience, no validation? That's when you know you're free. When you can let go of even the identity of the awakened one. When you no longer seek to be seen as spiritual, but simply live as spirit. Because here's the truth. The ego doesn't die when you awaken. It adapts. It studies your growth. It learns your new language. It mimics your insights. And it waits for the moment you think you're beyond it. That's when it returns, disguised as enlightenment. And this isn't just about you. Because when spiritual ego takes hold, it creates division. It creates hierarchies where there should be unity. It turns teachers into gurus and seekers into followers. It feeds the illusion of separation all over again. I'm awake, they're asleep. I'm conscious, they're not. This is not wisdom. This is fragmentation in disguise. The real power lies in becoming smaller, quieter, simpler, not shrinking in fear, but dissolving into truth. You don't walk around declaring your awakening. You let your life reveal it. You let your presence carry it. You don't correct others to prove your knowledge. You listen to understand. You don't need to win arguments or gather followers. You realize that impact doesn't require recognition. And yet, the ego will test you again and again. Every time someone praises your growth, every time you're tempted to correct someone, every time you compare your journey to theirs, that's when the mirror shows up. That's the opportunity to choose differently. Because the highest truth doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't even need agreement. It simply is. And now, more than ever, the world needs souls who have outgrown the need to be seen, who carry their truth like a flame, not to burn others, but to light the path quietly. Not to be admired, but to guide. Not to prove, but to live. So ask yourself, not once, but often, do I need to be seen as awakened, or am I willing to simply be? Because the final illusion isn't ignorance, it's superiority, and the final freedom is humility. At the end of the path, there's nothing left to chase. No more trying to become someone. No more fixing, proving, or arriving. Just being. Just presence. Just the truth that has always been waiting beneath all the noise. When you finally strip back every belief, every borrowed identity, every story you've told yourself about who you are, what's left is not emptiness. It's peace. It's still. It's whole. This is what Thoth pointed toward. Not a religion, not a system, not a hierarchy of enlightenment, but a state of conscious unity, a space beyond division, beyond seeker and teacher, beyond duality. The illusion of separation dissolves, and what remains is not an idea, but a knowing. You were never lost. You were only dreaming of being separate, of needing to find what was never missing. You stop asking the world to validate you. You stop needing to feel special. You see the sacred in everything, in the silence, in the ordinary, in the moments that never make it into your journal or your Instagram feed. Because now, you don't need to share everything to feel it's real. You just live it, fully, quietly, authentically. And from this space, a different kind of power arises. Not the kind that dominates, controls, or convinces, but the power of presence, the power of being so aligned with your essence that your life becomes a message without needing words. You start attracting not attention, but resonance. People feel something in your presence because you're not trying to be anything anymore. You're just being who you've always been, before the world told you to be someone else. And in this state, something beautiful happens. You start to see others differently. You stop dividing the world into awake and asleep, high frequency and low vibration. You see through the masks others wear because you've learned to remove your own. Judgment fades, compassion rises, because you remember how hard it was to wake up, how painful it was to shed layers, how terrifying it was to question everything you'd ever believed. And that remembrance gives you grace for those still finding their way. You no longer push your truth on others. You invite, you hold space, you embody. And that embodiment becomes the most powerful teaching, not through doctrine, but through presence. Because now, you're not living from the mind, you're living from the soul, and stillness becomes your guide. Not the stillness of inaction, but of non-resistance, of alignment, of knowing when to speak and when silence says more, when to act and when to simply be. You trust life not because it's predictable, but because you've remembered who you are within it. If you've followed this path, part by part, you already know. The remembering was never about adding more. It was always about subtracting, peeling away everything that wasn't you until only the truth remained. And that truth doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It doesn't compete. It simply is. You carry it now. You always have. But now you know. And from here, something new begins. Not another quest, but a way of living, where your presence is your purpose, where your breath is your prayer, where you no longer seek to escape life, but meet it fully, not as a character in a story, but as the awareness behind it. But remember, most people won't go this far. Most will stop at the surface. Some will awaken and fall back asleep. Others will awaken and let the ego wear the robe of the soul. But those who stay, who keep peeling, keep softening, keep choosing presence over performance, those are the ones who truly break free. And that's where this journey leads you. Not to superiority, not to status, but to surrender. And it's in that surrender that the most powerful transformation unfolds. Not one you perform, but one you live, quietly, consistently, truthfully. The system will still pull at you. The noise will still surround you. But now you're not in it. You're not of it. You carry stillness into chaos, awareness into distraction, soul into every step. And that is where freedom lives. Not in isolation, but in conscious unity. A remembering so deep that no system, no opinion, no external noise can make you forget again. And if you've made it this far, it means you're ready. Ready not just to wake up, but to stay awake. Not just to remember, but to live that remembering in every part of your life. And if you haven't already, make sure you sign up to the Insights Academy newsletter. Some truths are too direct to say here, and inside, you'll receive even more ancient wisdom, plus a free digital copy of the Kybalion while it's still available. Links in the description, don't miss it. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."